This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Hello, Reporter Room investigators. Come on in, come on in. Happy Saturday to you and yours. I hope you're enjoying a wonderful weekend. Today, we have a ton of new information in the Bryan Kohberger case. Oh my gosh. You guys, today we're going to be talking about Bryan Kohberger's bizarre relationship with his mother, red flags that Dr. Ramsland should have seen, proof that WSU knew more about BK than they're letting on, BK's prison video. I don't think this is a fake, but what does it tell us about Bryan Kohberger? Well, it tells us quite a lot. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the hunt for Bryan Kohberger from law enforcement's perspective. What did they do to capture him, to find him? And then we're going to talk about the timed runs that law enforcement did. And did this prove once and for all that Bryan Kohberger acted alone? So come on in, tell me where you're from. You can tell me what country, you can tell me what city, you can tell me what state, you can tell me what continent, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. My name is Jessica Della Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects, and share with you how to do the same thing. If you haven't subscribed to Reporter Room, well, it's free. And I can't get to 50,000 subscribers without your help. So please hit the subscribe button, like, share, leave a comment, and know that everything I'm sharing with you is my opinion. I do feel the need to CYA myself today. So come on in, tell me where you are from. And this video is for adults only, and viewer discretion is advised. So thank you to our subscribers, our mods, and our channel members. Our channel members are the ones with the blue, green, and red check marks next to their names. Our mods are the ones with the wrenches. And a special shout out to head mod Njaz. I see you in the house, and I saw Mike earlier too, I thought. Njaz is our head mod along with brother Mike. I'm like not seeing him right now, but hopefully he'll pop back in. Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you, Gene. Thank you, California Now. All right, so I'm glad you guys are here. Yeah, the dad really is showing his teeth on this photo. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about it. We're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's bizarre relationship with his mother and red flags that Professor Dr. Ramsland should have seen but didn't see. Proof that WSU knew about Bryan Kohberger. Was there a cover-up with WSU? And is this one of the reasons the state took a plea deal? We're going to look at Bryan Kohberger's prison video and discern what can we learn from this prison video about Bryan Kohberger. And then we're going to talk about the hunt, the investigation into Bryan Kohberger from law enforcement's point of view. Was Kaylee Gonzalez the real target of Bryan Kohberger? And we're going to begin with timed runs that prove that Bryan Kohberger acted alone. So let's go ahead and get started. And I have Michael up there because so this is from James Kevom. I hope I'm saying his name right. And law enforcement did a couple of timed runs. I just want to show you the receipts on that. I'm not going to read this to you because it's kind of wonky and long, but they did 2 timed runs from where they believe the white Hyundai Elantra was parked to 2 different routes to the 1122 King Road home. There was a longer route and a shorter route. So the timed runs reveal that it was possible for Bryan Kohberger to have done away with Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan in as few as 2 minutes and 6 seconds, going at a fast pace, which, again, he had 15 minutes more or less in the house. So going the fast pace from the shortest route from the Hyundai Elantra to the crime scene. And BK was in the house for 15 minutes, so he had plenty of time. And then in another test, a second test, they went a longer route from the Elantra to the house, and they were able to, and they went through the house to do away with everyone, obviously, and they had plenty of time. They had 3 minutes and 45 seconds is how long it took them when they went the longer route. So this proves, in my opinion, that Bryan Kohberger had plenty of time to commit these crimes alone. I do not think, with his pathology and what we know about the fact that he didn't even have any contacts that weren't family or friends or coworkers in his phone, that he did act alone. And I think this supports the prosecution and law enforcement claims also that Bryan Kohberger acted alone. So let's talk about Bryan Kohberger's bizarre relationship with his mother, Mary Ann, and then we're going to talk about Dr. Ramsland. Were there some red flags that she missed? Yeah, we're going to look at the prison video and try to see what we can discern from it. What does it show us about Bryan Kohberger, what he's like and what he's not like. And then we're going to do proof that WSU knew about Bryan Kohberger more than they ever let on. And I think that they were pushing for a settlement in this. And we're going to talk about the hunt for Bryan Kohberger from law enforcement's point of view. And was Kaylee Gonzalez the real target of Bryan Kohberger? So please stay with me. We're going to go through all of that. But I want to start off with Bryan Kohberger and his mother. Bryan Kohberger was, I believe, inspired. He was a copycat of Ted Bundy. In The Psycho, this was a film directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It explores complex psychological themes, primarily the character of Norman Bates, who exhibits dissociative identity disorder and a bizarre infatuation with his mother, so much so that he liked to dress up like his mother and had an alter ego that was his mother. So the film kind of delves into the nature of good versus evil, and then the impact of trauma, and particularly the Oedipus complex. So some speculate that BK's use of mother in the text messages that he was sending to his father might suggest a formal or emotionally distant relationship with his mother, Marian Kohberger. This is according to Fox News. Now, Heather Barnett, she is part of the Celebrate team. She's a digital forensics expert who led the team that was tasked by the prosecution to go through Bryan Kohberger's phone and hard drive. Now, she spoke out to people about the case and said that BK called his mother. We knew that he called 3 times, but we now know more details about it. At 6:17 a.m. on November 13th of 2022. So we're going to talk about the 3 calls he made on the day of the crime to Marianne and Michael Kohberger. So the calls were made to Marianne. Now we know it wasn't Michael, it was Marianne at 6:17 a.m., less than 2 hours after he did away with Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana. And her investigation also discovered that BK had called his mother again 54 minutes later. I'm sorry, for 54 minutes. And it was just an hour, a little over 2 hours, a little over an hour. 8:03 a.m. was the exact time. So that's phone call number 2. And this would have been when he returned to the crime scene. Remember, he returned to the crime scene at around 9 a.m. So this puts him on the drive in the car on the way back to the crime scene. So what was he talking about with Marianne Kohberger? Did he tell her that he left the knife sheath? Was she advising him on the what to do next? Or was he just making chit chat while he was going back to Looky Loo to see what he created? But he was on the phone with her at 8:03, and we know he returned to the crime scene a little past 9. And because they were on the phone for 54 long minutes, that he was on the phone with her while he was in the car. And it looks like he hung up with her right around the time that he arrived at the crime scene. So did he go inside? And is this why he got off the phone with Marianne Kohberger? So this new information from the Celebrate forensics team via Heather Barnett, she spoke with people, and she became part of the case after the Latah County Prosecuting Attorney's Office brought her in to assist in their investigation. Now, we know that he called his mom multiple times, but this is really creepy. And we're going to talk about Professor Dr. Ramsland, red flags she should have seen, in my opinion, BK's prison video. What does this show us and teach us about Bryan Kohberger? Proof that WSU knew about Bryan Kohberger. And I think they had a lot more to do with the settlement, along with University of Idaho, and the hunt for Bryan Kohberger from law enforcement's point of view? And was Kaylee Gonzalez the real target of Bryan Kohberger? We're going to talk about all of this in just a moment, but I want to talk about BK and his weird relationship with Mary and his father, Michael. So he had his parents saved as mother and father. This is just so darn creepy, you guys. It's just really, really creepy. Let me put Michael up. And this is the article that his mom wrote about Ted Bundy. So it does make you wonder, like, what the conversations were around the dinner table in the Kohberger house. Okay, so let's put, because involves his dad too. But he would go back and forth texting with Michael Kohberger saying, "Father, why did mother not respond? Why is she not answering the phone?" This is according to Heather Barnett from the Celebrex team. And on the morning of November 13th, BK's mom did eventually answer him. She answered her baby BK, and the two spoke for 36 minutes. And it wasn't long after BK and his mom got off the phone that he called her the second time. Now, this was a call that was on the way to the crime scene, right? And then he spent around 10 minutes at the crime scene around 9 a.m. or a little after. So this was just after he would have been on his phone with the mom driving there, and then got off the phone with his mom when he got there. So did he go inside? Was he looking for the knife sheath? Was he getting advice from his mother? We know he also spent 9 minutes on the phone in a third phone call, again with Mary Ann Kohberger at 9 a.m., connecting with her just minutes after their previous conversation. So again, this third phone call, he would have still been at the crime scene, and the two spoke again at around 4:05 p.m. and 5:53 p.m. again on November 13th, and the final conversation at 5:53 p.m. on November 13th lasted 96 minutes. So over an hour and a half. What were these two talking about for an hour and a half? Why were there 5 phone calls to Mary Ann that day? So by the time November 13th ended, Bryan Kohberger and his mother, Mary Ann Kohberger, had spoken on the phone for well over 3 hours. So not present on BK's phone. What wasn't there is just as interesting. And what was there? What wasn't there were BK's phone calls and texts with any friends or any people outside of his family, with the exception of one group chat. And it was just a benign group chat. So BK would mostly speak to his parents, according to Heather Barnett. She said that he would begin calling his mom usually as early as 4 a.m. in the morning. So this information was gathered by the Celebrate team. They were working on behalf of the prosecution, and it was gathered from BK's Samsung Galaxy phone. Now, he owned and purchased this phone in June of 2022, around the same time that he moved from Albrightsville, Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington. Now, Heather notes that BK completely powered off his cell phone between 2:54 a.m. and 4:48 a.m., a move likely intended to protect himself while he did away with Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. And in the end, it was a move that proved to be incredibly revealing, according to the Celebrex team. When he powered it off, it was a human pushing a button. So again, the battery didn't die. The battery was nearly 100% charged, according to Heather Barnett. And she said that he not only powered the phone off, but he disconnected it from its Wi-Fi. So she said it was a pretty awesome moment. Now, she did forensics in the phone forensics, digital forensics in the Gabby Petito case, and she also did it in the Richard Allen Delphi case. And we're going to talk about Richard Allen in a live stream that I'm going to do after this one. But others believe that it could be interpreted as a sign of an unusually or dysfunctionally close, unhealthy attachment, especially that BK reportedly called his mother just right after he did away with these 4 innocent young people. And he had his mother not only referred to them in text, but he had her listed as mother and his dad listed as father in his cell phone contacts. That in and of itself isn't so weird. It's a little weird, but the fact that he's referring to her as mother in his text to his dad is strange. So it's important to note that without further information or psychological assessment, It's tough to to exactly determine the precise reasons why Bryan Kohberger chose to call his parents mother and father. But BK's own attorneys described him in court filings as being socially awkward. Uh, and so he, it seems like he definitely preferred to reach out to his mom over his dad. But I'm just wondering if these cell phone calls, these 3 hours worth of phone calls on the day of the crimes, is what sent the Kohbergers into planning a trip to go get baby Bryan. I believe they raised somebody who was very enmeshed and a man child with his parents to go get their child in that car, that Hyundai Elantra, because flying across the country just to drive back with Bryan, if he was continuing at WSU, if they thought he was continuing at WSU as an employee, why would they feel the need to bring the car back to Albrightsville? They wouldn't. He could leave it there and Bryan could fly back. Why his dad had to fly out there. And remember, these plane tickets for his dad weren't made until December 10th, and he arrived on December 12th. So it doesn't seem pre-planned, in my opinion. Let me know if you have a different. So he asked in the text, why is she not answering the phone? This is so creepy. And the fact that he's saying, Father, why did mother not respond? And the fact that he's calling her over and over as early as 4 a.m. just shows a lack of boundaries on Bryan's part, but also Mary Ann didn't enforce them either. So I think his language and the use of mother and father to describe his relationship with his parents. Ted Bundy, according to accounts of people who knew him, also, so I believe that he was a copycat of Ted Bundy, sometimes addressed his birth mother, Louise, as mother, even though he grew up believing that Louise was his sister. So that is a little bit more understandable. Ted Bundy didn't know that his sister was his mother. But it's just still kind of weird. And it does make you think about this kind of what appears to be an enmeshed relationship with his mother, Mary Ann. So we're going to talk about Dr. Ramsland and proof that WSU knew more about Bryan Kohberger than they told us. I think this is what they didn't want to come out during the trial. Bryan Kohberger's prison video. What does this teach us about Bryan and the hunt for Bryan Kohberger from law enforcement's point of view? Was Kaylee Bryan Kohberger's real target? We're going to talk about all of that in just a moment. But I want to talk about enmeshment and Mary Ann Kohberger for just a minute more. Let me go ahead and put Mary Ann up on the screen. Okay, so there's Mary Ann and Bryan's sister. So this is enmeshment is in psychology refers to relationships characterized by unclear boundaries. So when individuals become excessively involved in each other's emotions and decisions, and this can hinder individual development. Now, some key signs are blurred or absent boundaries. And I see this in this case. He is calling her as early as 4 a.m., which is there is a time difference, but it's still early, and calling her repeatedly. And then if she doesn't answer, he's texting his dad. Why won't mother answer? Just, hounding her until she gets on the phone with him. So the fact that she's refusing to set boundaries with him, I think, is interesting. Overly involved or controlling behavior. I don't know if Mary Ann was controlling or not, but it does seem like she was over involved. And so was his dad in the life. I know people have said it's normal to see your child, to drive with your child across the country, to see them home. But I feel like there was more to this than meets the eye. And I believe that this enmeshment with Mary Ann led to a lack of autonomy, and that Bryan Kohberger was not able to develop a strong sense of himself. So just a quick summary of Bryan Kohberger and his mom. And then we're going to talk about Professor Ramsland and some red flags that she should have seen. Bryan Kohberger's prison video. We're going to look at that together and see what that shows us. What does it teach us? And then proof WSU knew more about Bryan Kohberger than they ever let on. And the hunt for Bryan Kohberger from law enforcement's point of view. And Kaylee may have been Bryan Kohberger's targets. So we're going to talk about all of that in just a moment. But let's talk about some of the observations. Just a quick summary. So frequent and lengthy phone calls that Bryan reportedly called his mother multiple times a day on the day of the crimes, totaling over 3 hours of conversation. That is a lot of time to be talking to your mother after you've just done away with people. 2, early morning calls. He made frequent calls to his mother, sometimes as early as 4 a.m. So disrupting his own sleep. I mean, she knew he wasn't in bed sleeping. He had his parents saved, his mother and father. This detail noted from the phone records. I just think this is so unusual. Number 4, reliance on his father to reach his mother, with BK reportedly texting Michael Kohberger to ask why mother wasn't answering when she didn't answer his calls. 5 hours of video calls while awaiting trial. So get this, an inmate at the Latah County Jail stated that BK would spend hours each day on video calls with Mary Ann Kohberger. Again, enmeshment. 6, emotional reaction at the sentencing. I don't know. I don't see this as big of a red flag, but Mary Ann was very emotional. But what was more interesting is that Michael Kohberger didn't even show up to the sentencing. So what was going on there? Is it because of being called out by Steve Gonsalves? Remember, Steve Gonsalves called out Michael Kohberger and said, we know when you got your plane tickets. And in light of Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, and a lot of people, including myself, have made comparisons to Brian Laundrie's relationship with his parents, Chris and Roberta Laundrie. Remember, she wrote that burn after reading letter. And even more interesting is that when he hiked up and called his parents from a payphone, because of course he doesn't want to use his cell phone because he's feeling paranoid because what he just did to Gabby. So he hikes up to a payphone. And also he wanted to establish an alibi. We found out that as soon as his parents hung up with him, they immediately got him a lawyer, Stephen Bertolino. So that, to me, he had a lawyer before he ever drove back with Gabby's van, using Gabby's credit cards, with Gabby's cell phone. Number 7, lack of outward acknowledgement at sentencing. BK reportedly ignored his mother and sister as he left the courtroom after his sentencing. Not even a nod, not even a, nothing, just ignored them and walked out. And then number 8, potential influence on his defense. One report suggests that BK's mom was encouraging him not to plead guilty to the charges and face instead capital punishment. Now, again, maybe this is just, much to do about nothing, but it's starting to paint a picture of a very enmeshed relationship with Mary Ann and Michael Kohberger, in my opinion. And it's starting to paint a picture of Brian not being able to respect the boundaries of even his own family members. So let's talk about Bryan Kohberger targeting Kaylee. And then we're going to talk about Dr. Ramslin, the red flags she should have seen, proof WSU knew about Bryan Kohberger, Bryan Kohberger's prison video. I do think it's real, just FYI. What does this show us about BK? The hunt for Bryan Kohberger in just a moment, so please stay with me. But let's talk about Bryan Kohberger was targeting Kaylee Gonsalves. And we're going to also talk about Bryan Kohberger's bizarre downloads too, you guys. All right, so let's talk about Kaylee next. And this is Dr. Procado. Let me grab it. Let me take this down and put this up. All right, so this is Dr. Procado. Make sure you guys can see it. All right, you should be able to see it. Let me turn the volume up. Just want to do a quick sound check on this, just make sure you guys can hear. And let me move myself out of the way.
Dr. Procado. Oh, there you are. Sorry, you were silent. Start over. Here, we got you now.
It's not really possible to diagnose somebody with something like psychopathy from an armchair. It would require an extensive examination, at least review of records. But the reality is that certainly there are traits here that would warrant looking into that. The important thing to remember is that a portion of people who have psychopathic traits also have what might be called schizoid autistic detachment, which has nothing to do necessarily with autism. It means that a person has a kind of cold, alien-like rote quality where that person can think of the victims in a very objectified way, like a scientist working on a sample as opposed to a human being. And I think whatever's going on here, that mechanical detachment figures very heavily into the way this was done and the way he was presenting in court.
So that explains a lot about his demeanor. And now let's look at the information on Kaylee. Let me pull this. I have so many packages ready to go, you guys.
And crying. She then shut the door a short while later. She opened her door again and saw someone approximately 5'10" tall, dressed in black with a ski mask, standing in the kitchen. This is absolutely stunning information.
So sometime in the early mornings, this was, they have it redacted, but we know it's Dylan, was awoken and opened her door and heard a male say, "It's okay, Kaylee, I'm here for you," and crying. And then she shut the door, and a short while later, he opened her door again and saw someone approximately 5 foot taller, dressed all in black with a ski mask, standing in the kitchen.
According to a surviving roommate, the killer, Bryan Kohberger, used Kaylee Gonzalez's name before he ended her life. If that surviving roommate was right, he knew who Kaylee was. He knew where Kaylee lived. And it might just have been a targeted attack with Kaylee Gonzalez being the target, or at least one of the targets.
Yeah, I think
here's where I want to add.
And I just think we do have to consider the possibility that there was more than one target. Remember, Xana and Maddie were both currently working at the Mad Greek. And we now know from geofencing that Bryan Kohberger did go to the Mad Greek. And Kaylee used to work there. So this could have been multiple victims targeted.
Some context, and it's important context. From the thousands of pages of case files that we have been reading since this crime was committed nearly 3 years ago, that surviving roommate, Dylan Mortensen, gave more than half a dozen interviews to the police after the murders. And while her story has remained really, really consistent, most of the answers that she gave about what she heard that night included hearing the words, "It's okay, I'm here to help you." It's okay, I'm here to help you, without Kaylee's name attached. So this is the first time we're hearing that at least one of her statements to the police included hearing the killer saying Kaylee's name.
So I do think it's significant if he called Kaylee out by name, and it also would explain why Kaylee, what happened to Kaylee was just absolutely so brutal. What happened to all of them was brutal and awful, but what he did to Kaylee was particularly vicious, and we know this from Steve Gonzalez.
There is also this from Washington State University, where Kohberger was teaching as an assistant. He was pursuing his PhD in criminology, and we knew that he was unbelievably unpopular there. We knew that there was friction, especially with the female students and the female colleagues he had. But in these new documents that we've been able to obtain, they're still not public, but News Nation has obtained them. In fact, Brian Enton, my colleague, who's been working doggedly on this story for the last almost 3 years, was able to get these. We're told that a criminology professor issued a stark warning to other professors and other supervisors.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Because I feel like WSU knew. There was plenty of reason for them to know what Bryan Kohberger was, who he was. So let's talk about that. And then we're going to go through the prison video of Bryan Kohberger next. Let me change the screen here. So WSU, in my opinion, they had plenty of reason to know a lot about Bryan Kohberger. So let's talk about that. What did they know and when did they know it? Come on in and tell me where you're from. Tell me, let's do a poll while I'm doing this. Who do you think Who do you think was the target? Was it Kaylee? Was it Maddie? Was it Xana? Was it Ethan? Or was it all three of the women or all four? Let me know by just typing in an A if you think it's Kaylee. Put a K. Put a K if you think it's Kaylee, an M if you think it's Maddie, an X if you think it was Xana, an E if you think it's Ethan. If you think it's all of them, just put all of them. And let's just see where you guys are at on this. So Bryan Kohberger also made some really creepy downloads too. Just really, really creepy. We're going to talk about those in just a second. But sometime in the early morning, we know that Dylan woke up, and we knew that she opened her door multiple times. But what she heard the mail say was, "It's okay, Kaylee." I just wanted to show you the receipts from News Nation before I gave you this information. "I'm here for you," is what Dylan thought he said. And crying, she heard crying, and then she shut the door. And a short while later, she opened the door again. And this is when she saw someone 5'10" or taller, dressed all in black with a ski mask, standing in the kitchen. So if surviving roommate Dylan was correct, and Bryan Kohberger knew Kaylee's name, and he obviously was in the house, then this does suggest that Kaylee was targeted and that there were connections between Bryan Kohberger and the victims. And I want to talk about WSU next. So let's talk about WSU. What did they know about Bryan Kohberger? When did they know it? Because this is what they did not want, in my opinion. They did not want this to come out at trial. It's coming out in drips and drabs, which is probably a lot better for WSU. But a professor was sounding the alarm about BK in documents obtained by News Nation. A Washington State criminology professor, where BK was a teaching assistant pursuing his PhD in criminology, was warning other professors and supervisors that BK might be a predator. And guess what WSU did? Nothing. They didn't do a thing. They had female students who were telling them that they were being graded differently than the male students. They had female students telling him he was following them out to the car. They had male and female students saying that he was, saying that men were going to take the jobs away from the women. They had male and female students telling them that he was using his body to block them and force them to go around him. And they had a professor telling them that BK might be a predator. And they could have had HR go back through Bryan Kohberger's resume in an effort to look for an excuse to fire him, because Bryan Kohberger had lied about the dates that he had worked at his jobs on his resume. He wasn't honest. So they could have looked for a reason to fire him. But instead, they did absolutely nothing. So this is what he wrote. He said, "Kohberger is smart enough that in 4 years, we will have to give him a PhD. Mark my word, I work with predators. If we give him a PhD, that's the guy in many years when he's a professor, we will hear is harassing, stalking, and SAing." This is what the note said. So this warning was sent months before the November 13th, 2022 crimes. And I believe that this is another reason why the prosecution agreed to settle so quickly, and why, in my opinion, the prosecutor, Bill Thompson's only doing, friendly interviews, softball questions. He, did his victory lap. But I think that there was no effort, in my opinion. And again, this is my opinion, so don't come for me, WSU. But if you do, that's fine. I'll depose you. I would love to. I have some questions. There was no effort by WSU to protect its female students, in my opinion, even though they had a professor sounding the alarm, even though they had multiple female students sounding the alarm, even though they had male students, multiple male students sounding the alarm, even though he was following female students out to their car, even though he stole a key from a WSU colleague. I don't know if they knew about that, but WSU did absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. They didn't have HR go back through his resume and find the lies that he had told about the dates that he had worked at certain jobs. They could have called his employers to check this out, and they could have used this as an excuse to get rid of Bryan Kohberger right away. But they didn't do this. Instead, they kept Bryan Kohberger in a position of power. over their students, including female students, in my opinion. And I believe that WSU was tipped off by local law enforcement on December 19th. Once WSU heard that one of their employees, BK, was the predator in this case, that's when they decided that they would let him go. December 19th, when they were tipped off, in my opinion, by law enforcement. Because remember, the Pullman chief of police at the time, who tells us that he heard from the Moscow police chief that it was Bryan Kohberger. Who does he work for now? Well, he went and got a job as a chief of police for WSU campus police. So it's very, very, they all know each other. So this is the exact day that Bryan Kohberger was fired. And in my opinion, this is another reason that the powers that be, that Howard Blum was sounding the alarm about in the interview that I did with him last month, the powers that be did not want Bryan Kohberger to stand trial because they didn't want female student and male student after female student and male student get up on the stand and talk about all of his predatory behaviors at WSU and then be asked, what did WSU do to the press? So instead, the prosecution quickly settled it. So we're going to talk about Dr. Ramsland and the red flags that she missed, but I want to look at Bryan Kohberger's prison video. I want to discuss the hunt also from law enforcement's point of view. We're going to talk about Dr. Ramsland and all the red flags she missed. And then we're going to talk about whether or not Kaylee Gonzalez was BK's target. Well, we know she was. So let's talk about Bryan Kohberger in his cell. Let me take this down and pull this up. Okay. Let me pop the volume and boost it on my end. All right, here we go. Okay, so it's very, very short clip, but I do want to look at it together. And I do want to take a moment to look at and see what we see, what we can learn about Bryan Kohberger from these images. I do believe this is authentic, and I believe that this was taken in the Idaho State Maximum Security Prison. That's who I think this came from because Ada County has denied it. Latah County has denied it. The Idaho Maximum Security Prison that he's currently housed in has not denied it. What they've said is they're investigating it. So I do believe that this was taken off of a monitor. There's cameras that were to be looking at him. He's on isolation, security precautions, which is why he's in isolation, why he gets a cell all to himself. But let's look and see what can we learn. First of all, people thought it was weird that he wasn't in a prison jumpsuit. But if you look right here, because I guess, he wore the prison orange, but that would have been from Ada County. Once he's transferred, this might be what they wear at the Idaho Maximum State Prison. We can also see that he's carefully cleaning what looks like a pair of black Crocs. There's a shoe here and a shoe here. So he is got some OCD. He's meticulously cleaning what are probably his shoes. And we see a pair of orange shoes here. Now, I don't know. One of these are probably shoes. I would think it would be the slides that he would wear in the shower. And then these are probably the only other pair of shoes that he has. You can see that there are some things lined up on his bed. Let me back up, see if we can see a little bit more. Looks like pretty evenly spaced apart on the bed, too. You can see there are 3 items about evenly spaced apart. And you can see this is the toilet, and behind the toilet is the sink. This would be the sink that he uses. He probably wet the paper towel in the sink. And the grab bars are probably if they have somebody who's handicapped or maybe elderly in solitary. And then a lot of people have wondered what Bryan Kohberger is staring at here. I believe if you look inside this little cage, it looks like it has a tiny little TV. So it looks like he does have access to a TV, but that he doesn't really have access to it. He can look at it through this chain linked box where it's housed, but he doesn't have the ability to change the channels. It doesn't look like, unless one of these things on the bed is a remote control, and he can change it with that. And that this could be a remote right here, but he has to watch a tiny little TV behind a cage. So it's not a clear view of the TV, but I think that's what he's doing. I think he's watching TV while he cleans his shoes. And then if you look on top of the TV set, you can see it's not pristine. You can see there's a couple of cups here sitting there. So he's not as OCD about cleanliness. Now, he could be OCD about hand washing. There's been a lot of comments that I've seen online about the fact that his hands and wrists are really red. And we also heard from one of the people that were in jail with him at Latah County that he would wash his hands until they were red. So the fact that his hands are scrubbed clean, he would be scrubbing them in this little sink back here. And you can see the toilet paper roll is here, and it looks like another piece of paper towel is here. He probably uses this to wipe the sink. But you can see he's got some cups littered there. It's not like he has a side table to put them on, but there are multiple cups. And so he doesn't seem like he's as OCD as maybe Ann Taylor said that he was, as far as some things, probably with hand washing, but maybe not with cleanliness. When I first looked at this, I saw this blue thing. I don't know why I thought this. I thought it was like a parrot or something. It's not. It's definitely a screen, a blue screen from a TV, which I think he is watching. And you can see on top of the cage, he's just got some cups. One is turned upside down, one is right side up, and it looks like some kind of a orange, probably a orange shirt, maybe part of a jumpsuit, but just kind of not carefully. It's just sort of hanging there. So again, the OCD, he is cleaning his shoes. He looks like he scrubs his hands till they're red, but I don't see like OCD with how he keeps the room. It doesn't look that orderly. His shoe is just on the floor here. The other two are sort of against the wall, but not as neatly as I would expect it to be. Maybe let me know if you have a different feeling on it. And I think was trying to make out what was on the top of this. I thought maybe it was a towel, but this could just be another pair of dark pants. He might have another shirt and a dark pants that he alternates with in prison. So he has two pairs of clothes and he showers every other day. And you can see here there's toilet paper stacked up here in the corner. And then you can see, this is why I thought it was a TV, because there is a plug that plugs into the wall that connects it to the TV, which is why I thought it was probably a TV. So I think this was something that somebody took while they were watching him on the monitor. Let me know if you guys have a different feeling. We're going to watch the video together one more time. Let me move myself up here. Yeah, mother made sure he had new clothes. Yeah, probably. So I'm curious who you guys thought what the target was. Looking for names. If you thought it was, if you agreed that it was probably Kaylee, or if you thought it was somebody else. And just says, look how his hands are. They are raw red. Yeah, they're red. And Enjaz is the one. She's our head mod. Here's our other head mod, Michael. Enjaz is the one that brought me this video. So thank you for that, Enjaz. Let me see. I think I need to back up to get this. Who you guys think the target is? Oh, here we go. I found it. Okay, so you guys, Faraday thinks it's Maddie. And I told you guys to please keep your mind open for new information, because we're going to be getting new information on this case through, for the next couple of months. Mike says, I doubt he expected a dog that night. I'll say that much. And Jazz also thinks it was Maddie. Colleen thinks it was Kaylee. Micro Kimmy thinks it's Maddie. Maddie. Tacos thinks it's Maddie. Tori thought Maddie. Kaylee. Shan says, I always believed Kaylee was the target. Court and Kieran thinks that it was Kaylee and Maddie. Lainey thinks Maddie and the house in general. Kaylee, Jean thinks, DM, thank you for modding today, thinks it was Kaylee. Quizzical Girl says Kaylee. Lori Dart says Kaylee. Thanks for modding today, Lori. Red Cloud says Kaylee. Shan thinks it was Kaylee. Tracy thinks it was, I don't know who that is. I'm sorry, Tracy. If you want to clarify, I will post it for you. James put Maddie. Xana thinks it was Maddie and Kaylee. Sandy thinks it was Maddie and Kaylee. Margie thinks it was all of them. Grunge thinks it was all of them. Common says all of the females, all of the ladies. Donna thinks it was Kaylee. Julie says, hi, everyone. All of them except Ethan. Hi, Julie. Thanks for being here today. Lynn thinks Molly, Maddie. Mike thinks it's Kaylee and Maddie. Darlene says Maddie. Hound Lover, all of the girls he couldn't have. ASP. Lizzie says a house full of cute sorority girls. Teresa said the Mad Greek publicity probably came out with a lie to stop all the press coming there to find out more. Yeah, you're probably right. Stephen thinks it's all of them. Jalen thinks it's Kaylee. Kami thinks it's Maddie. Thanks for modding today, Kami. Yeah, Maddie. All right, so we got a pretty interesting thinks it's all of them. Holly thinks it's Maddie, but that he studied the house and knew who all of them were. Joanne thinks Kaylee and Maddie. So that's very, very interesting. And Michael is asking, mods, please don't time out people just for having a different thought. Yeah, please don't time out people. We are a critical thinkers channel, which means that we welcome differing viewpoints. So you don't have to all agree with me. The only thing that we will time out people is if they're just disagreeing and just victim blaming. That we will time out for, because we're not going to victim blame or victim shame. And then the other thing that we'll time out for is just, inappropriate language, or just not just in general, not being, being rude. You can express your opinion. We're not going to all agree on every single case. All right, so let's watch this video of Bryan Kohberger together now that we've kind of picked out what we see one more time. And I'm not sure what's in this bag. I just do want to acknowledge that I did see the bag. I just don't know what's in it. And it looks like there's like maybe a couple of, I don't think this is part of the bed. It looks like there's a couple of maybe towels, like a towel and a washcloth hanging up on the end of the bed to dry. And I believe this might be a remote, but I can't say with 100% certainty. And what else is in the bag? I don't know. So I do think it's interesting that he's in there cleaning his shoes. I do think that's interesting. And I do think that it is telling. All right. So we went through the timed. Let me just put a picture up so if anybody comes by, they know what we're talking about. All right. So let's talk about Dr. Ramsland. Let's talk about Dr. Ramsland, and then we're going to talk about the hunt for BK from law enforcement's point of view. Where do they think the knife sheath is? What do they think about his trips to Clarkston? We're going to talk about all of that in a new interview that they gave. But let's talk about Dr. Ramsland and the missed red flags, because this is just, yeah. Let me see if I can pull this up. So this is an interview she gave with Bryan and Tim.
Pennsylvania. She has not spoken publicly about Bryan Kohberger until now. She's been on this show talking about other cases, but she's been very, very careful not to talk about Kohberger because of the trial, because she was going to be a witness at the trial, and she now feels comfortable to open up to us. And we've got so many questions, Dr. Ramsland, that I've got so many questions I've wanted to ask you for so long. I want to start with, how did you first meet Bryan Kohberger? What classes of yours was he in?
Okay, I want to be just clear that I'm still within the FERPA limitations that protect students and student information. So I will talk within that. I met him in the fall of 2018 when he came to DeSales University. He had an associate's degree, and he was going to get into our 4-year program as a psychology major. He selected the forensic track, which made him an advisee for me because I managed the forensic track.
So she was not just his teacher, not just his professor, but she was his advisor.
And he was also in my class that semester.
And Dr. Ramsland talks about FERPA. I should have mentioned that there's a law, it's a federal law, I believe, that She is not allowed to talk about certain aspects of a student, their grades, certain parts of their academic life. It's almost like a HIPAA. So she's going to tell us what she can, but unless Bryan Kohberger signs off, she's legally not allowed to talk about certain elements of his academic career. So just keep that in mind if there's some things that Dr. Ramsland can't answer. What was your perception of him?
He seemed like eager to be in the classroom. He was polite. He was respectful, intense, and curious.
And the reason we're watching this, you guys, is in light of the fact that we found out that a professor was trying to sound the alarm at WSU that Bryan Kohberger was a predator, that he thought he was going to essay other people, that he was trying to tell, texting about it. This SK expert picked up no red flags related to Bryan Kohberger, but she should have. We're going to talk about those together in listening to her own statements.
And there was no reason for me to think that he was anything other than someone who was really interested in this potential career.
Was there anything looking back now that was strange about him or that you noticed?
When I look back, there really isn't anything that stood out to me. I think when you're a teacher, your instinct is to accept students at face value. You don't, start with suspicions or, and there really weren't any red flags. He was always really quite respectful and grateful.
Okay, respectful and grateful. So it's how he was treating her. But we know that sociopaths, you and I know this, right? Sociopaths are very charming and respectful and grateful when they're getting their way. I mean, we know they're charming, that they can be charming. But we have the chief of Pullman Police Department saying that they didn't hire him because they saw red flags. They didn't think he was going to get along with their other police officers. We have a professor at the Washington State University, whose text messages have now been released sounding the alarm that Bryan Kohberger was a predator. But Dr. Ramsland, who's an SK expert that wants to write a book about Bryan Kohberger to help identify SKs, is his student advisor and professor. She sees no red flags. And again, sociopaths can be charming and manipulative. I mean, but nothing stood out to her.
He would thank me for things. He was attentive. He would do the work. I didn't have any concerns.
She had no concerns. Not a single red flag from this SK expert. So this woman wants to write a book with Bryan Kohberger to help us identify SK. She's already written a couple of books. She spent 5 years with BTK, giving him lots of attention, right, to write books about Dennis Rader. But she's going to write a book about Bryan Kohberger. I'm sorry. Maybe somebody does need to do a study on him, but I don't think it is this SK expert. I don't understand why she didn't see any red flags with him when everybody else saw red flags.
I think it was 4 classes that you taught him.
4 classes. She had him in 4 classes, and she was his student advisor. But remember what she just told us: no red flags. But shouldn't his intense interest in criminology been a red flag? What do you guys think? Yes or no? Should this hurt his intense interest in criminology, been a red flag? It was even a red flag to one of the criminals that he called when he put the survey up on Reddit. He put that survey up asking people how they thought and how they felt about things and how they picked their victims. And he called this criminal, according to Dateline NBC, and even the criminal that he was calling had red flags, that he was like too into the whole thing.
And what were those classes?
There were 3 undergraduate courses in the forensic track that I taught, and he was in all of them. Well, one was Introduction to Forensic Psychology. Another was my death investigation class, which was called Psychological Sleuthing. And the third one was called Dangerous Minds, the Psychology of Antisocial Behavior. And then he got into the graduate program in criminal justice for a master's degree. And he took a course with me called behavioral criminology.
So she had 4 classes with him, and she's academic advisor, but she didn't pick up on anything. She tells us there's no red flag. So I guess my question is there any value to studying these predators, or at least any value to her writing a book about Bryan Kohberger? When you have a sociopath, a psychopath, sitting in 4 of your classes who you're an academic advisor to, and you can't pick this guy out of 4 classes, you didn't pick up on anything? You didn't see any red flags? She taught a course in antisocial behavior, but no red flags.
Is there anything, Dr. Ramsland, when you look back and you think about the curriculum of those classes, and not getting into his specific experience, but when you think about what you taught in those classes, that you think, oh my gosh, he may have used that in what he's now accused of doing here in Idaho?
Yeah.
Well, the antisocial behavior course involves serial killers and mass murderers, and we do a lot of case analysis. I use two books that I wrote. One was written with the BTK killer, whom you just mentioned, and his decision process and the crimes and how he thought about them and felt about them, and what was it like for him.
Think of all the narcissistic supply she gave Dennis Rader
to be caught. So that's a very intense book. And also I have one called The Mind of a Murderer, which was about various behavioral experts over the past century who interviewed killers, mass murderers, and serial killers to get as close as possible, spending a lot of time with them to get as close as possible to their process of becoming a criminal.
So she did this under the auspices, under she's saying that she had to do this. She wrote these books so she could, find out, get inside their minds. But she has one sitting in front of her, not for 1 class, not 2, but 4 classes. And she's his academic advisor, but nothing, no red flags. Again, what is the benefit of her writing a book with Bryan Kohberger? In my opinion, there isn't one. But let's continue on together.
And so he would have been exposed to that. I think now looking back, I would look at maybe some of the things that interested him as being, something that gives me pause. But we always have to think about, we all know, everyone in this field, forensic psychology and criminology, know that we could have students who might become offenders.
So she knows that she could have students that might become offenders, but nothing about this guy was setting off red flags, only in retrospect. So again, what is the benefit of having Dr. Ramsland write a book? I don't think there is any benefit to writing a book. Let me know what you think. Do you think there's a benefit? Let's check in with you guys. What do you think? Is there a benefit to having Dr. Ramsland write a book on this? Is this going to be helpful for society? Is this going to help identify members that could do this? Or is this just an excuse to write a book? And she's just going to cash in. What do you guys think? I want to welcome I Love Tacos as a brand new Reporter Room channel member. Welcome to the Reporter Room family. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. Thank you, California Now, for the $99 super sticker. Thank you so much. That is so awesome. Thank you for your kindness. California Now, I want to thank you for being a channel member for 16 months. And California Now says yes. I want to thank NJAWS, oh my gosh, for gifting 5 Reporter Room memberships. If you're watching, come on up and talk to me. You could end up getting a gifted membership if you come into the top chat and talk to me. And so thank you, NJAWS. That is so nice of you. If you got a gifted channel membership, please make sure you say thank you to NJAWS. I want to thank Michael Cole for the $1.99 super sticker. Thank you so much, Michael. That is so, so kind of you. Thank you, Sinjayas. Elmo for the $1.99 super sticker. I hope I said your name right. Thank you so much. And I want to welcome Michael as a channel member, a producer for 1 month. I want to thank Teresa for gifting 5 Reporter Room memberships. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to both you and to NJAZ for gifting these. Let me Teresa and I just want to write your names down. I get notified of the other things, but I don't always get notified of the gifted channel membership. So I just do want to make a note of that, and so I can put you up for our thank yous next month. So thank you, Teresa. And thank you, Donna, for the $2.99 super sticker. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. Thank you very much. I would like to welcome Tori Byrne as a brand new Reporter Room membership. Welcome to the channel. I'm so glad that you came by to spend a little bit of time with me. And thank you. And welcome to the Reporter Room family. And thank you to Donna Bravo, who was for modding today, and for the $2.99 super sticker. That is so nice of you. Thank you so much. I will be putting all of this toward the channel. So I'm just curious if you think there is a benefit to her writing a book. Yes or no? Please tell me. I just really want to know what your thoughts are on this, because I'm not seeing it. And I want to thank Pam for the $4.99 super sticker. Thank you so much, Pam. I will be putting that toward the channel. So thank you so much for that. Very grateful. Mike says her book should be titled her self-titled How I Missed Bryan Kohberger. Yeah, exactly. But I don't think, and she says at the end of this interview that she does plan to write a book with him. And I just don't think she should. Well, let me go toward the end.
Why I would want to work with him and study him, because I want to understand how he was able to completely fool me.
And Brian Enton's face here just pretty much says it all. She wants to work with him to understand how he was able to completely fool her, the SK expert.
Well, it'll be interesting to see as this moves along, if that indeed ends up happening.
His face just says it all. If that indeed.
Dr. Ramsland, appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing this.
If I were her, I would
insight into your former student. Thank you.
I would have just quit while I was ahead. Why make this your legacy, Dr. Ramsland? Don't do this. You have the title of SK expert. If you want to hang on to that title, I wouldn't go on any more interviews and talk about how you saw no red flags and share that you were his academic advisor in addition to having him in 4 classes and saw no red flags, only in retrospect. And then that you want to write a book about how he's able to fool you. She wants to know why. He doesn't need all this attention from you to write a book on this. Maybe somebody should write a book on this. I just don't think it should be Dr. Ramsland. Let me know if you have a different feeling about it. And Michael is asking again, please don't time out people for having a different opinion. Please don't. If you guys do that, I will, please don't time out people for disagreeing. But this is a critical thinkers channel. As long as people are sharing their opinion in a respectful way, it's fine. We don't all have to agree. We're not going to all agree. GF Twin said nobody, because she was going to make it sound like he wasn't a bad guy. Yeah. Trisha says no to the book. No, not her. Yeah, maybe somebody should write a book, but I just don't think it should be her. And Lori says 0 benefit. Red Cloud says no. Michael says no. She wants to pitch her books. Well, she did do that. She made sure to tell us about her books. And Truth Exposed said a lot of people in FBI profiling are psychopaths or sociopaths themselves. Maybe. And oh my gosh, NJAZ just gifted another 5 Reporter Room memberships. Oh my gosh, you guys, if you got one of those, please make sure you say thank you to NJAZ, and thank you so much, NJAZ, for gifting those. That is really, really nice of you. Thank you so much. All right. So Can I Kick It says, that's interesting that she mentioned, looking back, his interested would give pause now. Right. But, and just as not her. Not her. I agree. I mean, somebody could do it. Just maybe Howard Blum could go do it. Maybe somebody else could do it, but I just don't think. Yeah, her book should be titled "How I Missed Bryan Kohberger." Stephen says perhaps some of the Moscow college kids saw BK's love for serial criminals and got him involved. Somehow I wasn't there. To me, the evidence contradicts itself so far. Very interesting. Never forget, says she has made a tremendous amount of money off these criminals. Yeah. She has. And she gets the title of SK expert, right? Julie says no. DM says no. I don't think BK is worth studying. He was a copycat and he seems pretty transparent in my opinion. Court and Kieran say maybe she needed time to go back and remember any incidences that may seem weird now. Right. Betsy is giving claps. James says, how did he achieve with visual snow? Well, as I've shared with you guys in the past, I think that's a great question. Peripheral snow visual snow can affect your periphery. So your periphery could be back here. It can be here. I don't think it was his central vision because he had a driver's license. He was able to drive. So I suspect his visual snow was either in his periphery here or in his periphery back here. That's my opinion. If you guys have a different one, thanks for modding today, DM. Pip Lover says, just because someone is weird or has red flags doesn't make them an SK. Looking back, it's easy to see the signs, but how many students has she had that were also weird and turned out fine? Fair enough. Tara says, I think she knew Jessica. She was just waiting for him to do something wrong. Truth Exposed says, Bundy's criminal justice teacher missed the signs with him too. So did BTK's criminal justice professor. Red flags, definitely. All right. So I do want to, hey, good to see you today. Thank you so much for your encouragement and positivity. I appreciate that. We're going to go through how law enforcement found Bryan Kohberger next. Has anyone ever seen his teeth? Are they bad? He never shows them. Whose teeth? I don't know whose teeth you're talking about. Thank you, Pam. Rhoda Jane says, did Dr. Rimslin ever see him in prison? I thought everything was done online. I don't know if it was the whole time because he was there for multiple years. I don't think everything was done online. I think, but I don't know. That's a great question. And I'm just going to say, I don't know because I don't know. All right, let's go through how they found out, law enforcement, what steps did they go through in searching for Bryan Kohberger? I think this is really, really interesting. Lots of red flags. So let's talk about that. So on law enforcement's hunt for Bryan Kohberger, November 13th, they had multiple, they got the call. The 911 report operator would have transferred the call over. They heard that there had been multiple people who had been done away with. This was Moscow Police Corporal Brett Payne. He arrived at the 3-story house in the neighborhood this was the 1122 King Road home. It was 2 hours after a 22-year-old rookie patrol officer first reported back to emergency dispatch about the crimes recorded on the 911 call. Now, we all have heard the 911 call now. Officer Payne walked through the crime scene for his initial pass on that Sunday afternoon. The items were strewn about like it was a typical college student. He wrote in his police report, he noticed nothing out of the ordinary on the first floor. He then proceeded up the stairs, and there was a second floor bedroom, and he saw a young woman who was later identified as Xana Kernodle with, very badly. I'm not going to describe anything. I'm going to keep this G-rated, but obviously she had been done away with. And beside her, still in bed, partly covered with a blanket, was her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin. Officer Payne continued upstairs to the third floor where he saw two young women, later identified as Kaylee Gonzalez and Maddie Mogan, lying in the bed next to each other. Next to the women was something out of place. He spotted a key piece of evidence. According to the Idaho State Police, Lieutenant Darren Gilbertson, a leather knife sheath, which we now know had the DNA belonging to BK in the in the snap of that knife sheath. Officer Brett Payne relayed the details to Lieutenant Gilbertson, who got to Moscow about a half hour later with his team. So notice one of the things that I think that the Idaho State Police did that was right versus what in other crimes we've seen where they have not handled things right. And one of the things that they did that was right, in my opinion, for this crime scene is that they immediately brought in the Idaho State Police and the FBI. This was a small town police department. They knew it was more than they could handle on their own and very wisely added in the Idaho State Police. So we're hearing now from Officer Brett Payne and Idaho State Police Lieutenant Darren Gilbertson. So Officer Brett Payne relayed the detail about the knife sheath to Lieutenant Gilbertson, who got to Moscow about a half hour later with his team. So the police called him to assist, and we knew it was important. We knew it didn't fit in there. They're talking about to the Idaho Statesman, which is my sourcing on this. Quote, obviously, this is Lieutenant Gilbertson. We knew that it appeared that all four had been, and I'm paraphrasing here, done away with a knife, and probably the same one. Other potential clues were sparse, and it soon became clear to Idaho State Lieutenant Gilbertson, and then who was a sergeant who drove up from Lewiston, that he was observing a whodunit, and he was going to put everything that he had into focusing and solving this case. So Moscow police secured the house. They secured the crime scene. Not even James Fry, then local police chief and former investigator, entered the crime scene. This is how secure they made it. For hours, police waited to begin collecting evidence until a search warrant was approved at about 5 p.m. Lieutenant Gilbertson said hundreds of reports released by the Moscow Police Department and reviewed by the Idaho Statesman showed the police quickly cordoned off the area and began tasking officers with varying assignments. The initial responder identified the college-age people gathered out front of the house. Another officer logged the people entering the home, and a corporal took initial photos. And a patrolman stood guard at the sliding glass door at the kitchen, which was found ajar. So now we're learning that the door wasn't just left wide open, it was found ajar. So definitely that was the entrance and exit of the perpetrator. So more than a dozen people, including Dylan and Bethany, who survived. Family members and friends of the victims were taken to the police station about a mile away for interviews. And one after another, they were questioned, basically interrogated by law enforcement. Those who remained waited within the department's second floor training room. Moscow Police Chief Anthony Dallinger told the Idaho Statesman by phone. Now, other officers were busy canvassing the neighborhood to obtain video from every house with a surveillance system. So this happened right away. They were gathering video, which explains the 12 hours of raw video footage that Ann Taylor said she didn't have time to go through. And oh, by the way, Judge, could you just throw that out for me? Pretty please? Could you just throw that out? Because I don't have time to look at the video footage. Of course, that was denied. They also found footage from a camera and a light bulb base of the immediate neighbor's balcony. And this may be why that particular camera caught so much and why Bryan Kohberger didn't know there was a camera right there. A lot of people have asked me in the comment section about this. And it turns out that there was footage from a camera and a light bulb base. So it wasn't immediately discernible as a camera, and this would become a critical piece of evidence. The next day, so that all happened on day one. They're collecting the videos, they're talking to the neighbors, they've secured the crime scene, they found the knife sheath, they've called in the Idaho State Police who have arrived on the scene. The next day, November 14th, investigators focused on what would be the key to unlocking the entire case, which was the tan leather knife sheath. It was stamped with the U.S. Marine Corps Eagle, globe, and anchor emblem, and designed for a K-bar knife. A former U.S. Marine, Lieutenant Gilbertson, had a particular familiarity with this particular K-bar knife. And remember, this particular knife, K-bar makes other knives for animals and for hunting, but this particular one that this knife sheath matched was designed for humans. So he knew with certainty that someone wielding a combat-style knife would have carried out, the attack. So that I'm watching my words here, guys. So he said that the tips of K-bar knives are known to break off when used in combat, but that didn't happen in this one. No parts of the murder weapon have ever been recovered, you guys. So we're going to talk about that in just a second, where law enforcement believes he threw the K-bar knife. So troopers drove to South Meridian the day after the crimes to hand deliver it to the Idaho State Police Crime Lab to begin inspecting it for potential DNA. So that's the knife sheath. Right away, they're looking for DNA. Meanwhile, in Moscow, an officer was sent to local businesses to ask about possible K-bar knife sales. Now, we now know that Bryan Kohberger purchased the K-bar knife in March of 2022 from Amazon and had it delivered to his own name at his parents' address, and thought that by using a gift card and trying to erase his Amazon search history, that he would be able to fool law enforcement. And as Olivia Gonzalez told him, he did not. A police spokesman and Dallinger, who was captain with the department at the time, denied specific inquiries into the K-bar knives around town in the investigation's first few weeks. He said that we wanted to protect that information from any potential, the suspect is still out there. So remember that Papa Roger talked about this. So Papa Roger had to either be a member of law enforcement, because the public didn't know, or Papa Roger was Bryan Kohberger. So if we let it slip or let it be known that we were specifically looking for a K-bar knife, that would tip them off that we found the sheath and that we got a piece of evidence here. But scouring Moscow didn't produce any leads, and by mid-afternoon on November 14th, the officer reported back that he was at a dead end. None of the sporting goods and hardware stores or the local Kmart, none of these places sold K-bars. On day 2, the FBI called in Chief Fry, and Lieutenant Gilbertson told the statesman that the investigators waited with bated breath to learn whether the state crime lab had found anything. And they continued working the case. Media attention and public interest began to peak. November 20th, they got the DNA results. So this is when they got the results. So a common idea persists among law enforcement that if they don't make an arrest within the first 48 hours, the likelihood that the case will be solved significantly drops. But Dallinger didn't think that this was the case. He didn't believe in the 48-hour rule, and he said that by chasing down lead after lead, he felt like investigators might be running out of possibilities. He said they had ups, they had downs. He said it was a roller coaster of emotions, excitement about a new lead, and then it was dashed, and something else comes up, and then it's dashed, and it just wears you down. So law enforcement was dealing with having to emotionally see the crime scene and live with that, and then dealing with the frustration of trying to solve this. But obtaining footage from that immediate neighbor's security camera proved to be tough within the first week. Within hours of arriving, they said they collected a memory card from the surveillance camera, but that they ran into technical difficulties and they were not able to pull any footage. So they returned the card, hoping to obtain recordings of what the camera captured in the neighborhood early that morning with the neighbor's help. So 4 days after, they were finally able to get in touch with the neighbor and obtain this footage, because they had learned she had left Moscow until the end of the month. This is according to records. The next day, another person who lived up the house was able to pull up the footage from that night on her phone and screen record it. She gave the video to the police, and they took the entire camera and the router as evidence. The video showed a white sedan, and the FBI eventually identified this as a white Hyundai Elantra circling the King Road neighborhood. We know now that he circled the neighborhood 5 times and the house 3 times. And police labeled the car Suspect Vehicle 1. And as the investigation extended into its first week, law enforcement was still waiting for word from the crime lab about the DNA on the knife sheath. Meanwhile, Dallinger said they worked to build the case. The rest of it was just good old-fashioned police work. He said literally boots on the ground, canvassing the entire town, talking to anybody and everybody, gathering video and audio, whatever we could from everybody. So this was solved by good old-fashioned police work. But they did use Othram Labs. They contracted with Othram to use the IgG DNA evidence. So this was an advanced DNA technique. And so it leveraged building ancestry databases to building a family tree, because they got DNA from the knife sheath. But when they ran it through CODIS, which has all felons, of course, Bryan Kohberger doesn't pop up. He's not a felon. And also his record had been expunged. So Othram at that point had helped Idaho, the state of Idaho, solve a few cold cases. And so on December 19th, this is when the DNA pinpointed the suspect, and law enforcement was able to say definitively, December 19th, that Bryan Kohberger was their suspect. And this is the exact same day that WSU let Bryan Kohberger go. So I do think that this does show that there was just good old-fashioned police work in solving this. So I want to talk about how they, what Bryan Kohberger did. There were some weird searches. Let me see if I can pull that up really quick. Bryan Kohberger did some weird searches. And he had some bizarre downloads. So on December 28th, Bryan Kohberger downloaded 4 of the daily updates of the Idaho crimes from the Moscow Police Department. He also downloaded them on Christmas Day. So he spent his Christmas, I think he was spinning after getting pulled over with those 2 traffic stops in Indiana with his dad, Michael. December 29th at 9:08, BK read an article in the New York Times about the ongoing search for the driver. At that time, they were saying a white Hyundai Elantra 2013 to 2011 to 2013. Of course, we know that a couple days after that, law enforcement updated it to a 2011 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. 2 minutes later, he searched online for auto detailing shop. So he sees that they're looking for a Hyundai Elantra, and his first thing is to look for an auto detailing shop. And at 9:19 a.m. on December 29th, he starts searching for used cars. Remember, his parents let him park the Hyundai Elantra in their garage. Let that sink in. In their garage, you guys. He was allowed to park the car in the garage. Why? So he's looking for auto detailing shop, and then he abandons that and starts looking for used cars. He looks at a Ford Fusion, a Volkswagen Jetta, and a Honda Civic, according to digital forensics expert Heather Barnett, who was hired by prosecutors to examine Bryan Kohberger's cell phone and hard drive along with the Celebrite team. And they have worked other cases, including the Delphi case with Richard Allen and also the Gabby Petito case. Other searches and downloads conducted by BK at this time show a man growing increasingly paranoid and suspicious as law enforcement was sitting outside surveilling his home, because on December 29th, he searched psychopaths paranoid. That term together, psychopaths paranoid. So we can see why Ann Taylor was so desperate to get the words psychopath and sociopath not be allowed to be used by the prosecution, as she was getting her way on that. But that's ridiculous, because he was searching those terms. He also searched wiretapping, and he also searched SKs. So psychopaths paranoid, because he was feeling paranoid, wanting to know. So he knew what he was. In my opinion, he knew what he was. And that same day, on December 29th, he downloaded information about another SK named Wayne Nance. And one day prior, he downloaded a Fox News article that revealed he wants to know how many Hyundai Elantras had parking registrations by University of Idaho and by WSU. And he specifically wanted to know from 2018 to 2020. So he was definitely feeling paranoid. And he found that there was 90 Hyundai Elantras. But not of all the odors were missing a front license plate like he was at the time of the crimes. and not all the owners had their DNA on the knife sheath. So Heather Barnett said that BK was incredibly skilled when it came to scrubbing his phone, and similarly really good at anti-forensic aspects on his hard drive too. So I do think that's very, very interesting. So let's talk about where Bryan Kohberger probably threw that knife sheath. We know that he went down to Clarkston. And let me pull that up for you guys. Okay. Just trying to see if I can get it on a map. Let's see. I'm just trying to see if I can pull it up. It doesn't, I'm just not getting an easy, maybe I can get a map quest. Yeah, this works. Okay. Let me take this down, put this up. All right. So you can see that this is not a short little drive. This is would have taken him, 45 to 56 minutes. And we know that when he was there, he went to the Costco, and that he went to, he was seen at a coffee shop. He was seen, so I believe he threw the knife sheath. He crossed a bridge then there were two rivers here. You can see two bodies of water. I think he threw it into one of those, or he buried it in the Nez Perce reservation. Let me see. Which is right in this vicinity here as well. So I think that that's what he did with the knife sheath. I think that he threw it in there. And I think that's where he disposed of it. I think he buried it, or he threw it in the water. Now, law enforcement did try to find it. They were looking. They just didn't have any luck with it. And Jazz is asking people to keep it classy in the chat. Yeah, if you can't keep it classy, just go ahead and take them out. They can time out. And Jazz, if they can't keep it classy, we want to try to, we're not going to all agree, and it's okay that we don't all agree, but we can still do this respectfully. Okay. So where is the K-bar knife? Well, it could be on his road trip back with his dad. He could have buried it there, but I think it's more likely that he got rid of it that afternoon. His phone, we know from his phone took him to the Clearwater and the Snake Rivers. Both are vast bodies of water. I think this is where he would have disposed of it. Some people feel like the shovel in his car, because it wasn't a snow shovel, that he could have buried it, wanting to go back and visit that knife and relive that. And so he drove by two rivers, both the Clearwater and Snake Rivers. They're both vast bodies of water where it is possible that he threw that knife sheath. And in my opinion, it would have been very hard for him to, very hard for anybody to find that knife sheath once he threw it away. So I do want to say thank you to our producers, Enjaz, Sasha Angel, George Brown, Christy Ballantyne, and Michael Cole. And thank you to our channel members. After this, I'm going to be doing an update on the Delphi case, Richard Allen. For those of you that don't know, Hulu just came out with a documentary, and Richard Allen's wife, Kathy, is speaking out. So we have quite a bit of new information on the Delphi case that I definitely think is worthy of an update. So we're going to be doing that next, separate from this live stream, if you want to follow me over there once we're done here. And I just want to say thank you to all of our channel members. If you would like your name to appear just like this, hit the join button. It's next to the subscribe button. And I update this list one day before each live stream. So this list will be updated again on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. And I also want to, this is for the last live stream, I want to do super thanks and coffee gratitude, and also gifted channel membership gratitude. Thank you so much for your kindness. All right, guys. Well, I think I'm going to leave it there. If you haven't subscribed, it's free. I can't get to 50,000 subscribers without your help. So please consider subscribing. And thank you so much for coming by to spend a little bit of time with me. It's always a pleasure and a joy to get to interact with each and every one of you. And I look forward to seeing you over at the Delphi case, which we're going to do right now.